for example, there's a 90% failure rate in clinical development. It takes almost 10 to 15 years to bring out a drug, and it literally costs billion and a half to $2 billion to actually bring a drug out. That space is a I mean is a big and powerful one, in terms of where AI can really, really make a difference and actually um, be that switch that really can change. It can be life-saving or life-changing.
Hi, Vinodh.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing today?
Excellent. Thank you for the time.
Good. It's nice to meet you, and thank you for sitting down with me to talk about your experiences, collate everything you've built, and some stories you have to tell as a founder and as being part of the Health Engine community. We're always excited to hear about what it is that you've done and what it is you're looking forward to. So I think getting into the first question, introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself, what it is that you've done, what it is you're building and excited about.
Yeah, no, that's great. So thanks again for the opportunity. And Health Engine was a great experience as well. So just in terms of introduction, I am Vinodh Balaraman, the CEO and co-founder at Collate AI. I previously was a senior partner at a large life science strategy firm called CS Associates, led the advanced data science practice, and also was previously a senior vice president at a tech consulting firm called Atos. And um, and then I'm a repeat life science AI entrepreneur, having also worked in other endeavors in this space. And by way of education, I have a undergrad in mechanical engineering from IIT Madras, a master's in industrial engineering, and an MBA from Chicago Booth. And over the years, I've been um, involved in various interesting experiences uh, in terms of building and turning around businesses, uh, you know, providing strategic advice to uh, companies, and you know, eventually settle down the entrepreneurial path that I'm on right now. But again, it's great to be here, and I look forward to this discussion.
Yeah, so I guess we can get started talking about Collate AI and what it is that you're building. What exactly is the problem Collate is solving, and how are you tackling it? For me, I know, like when I heard clinical events prediction, to the layperson, and at least to me before I got familiarized with it, being able to predict how people would be responding to drugs seemed like an impossible task. So, how are you approaching this problem, and what is it that you're building and doing?
Yeah, so just setting the stage for this, right? So there's um, the whole business of drug development is an expensive, onerous affair that is ridden by failure. For example, there's a 90% failure rate in clinical development. It takes almost 10 to 15 years to bring out a drug, and it literally costs billion and a half to $2 billion to actually bring a drug out. And the underlying driver is that of there is a lack of visibility into future study clinical events, and the direction things are going to go, and their patient-specific um, outcomes, right? So this in turn causes the failure of these studies. So yeah, that's kind of what we're trying to address, right? So we're with Collate AI, we've built, still building it's a patient level clinical events prediction engine uh, for best targeting the right patients to transform clinical studies, if you will, right? Which include both clinical trials and what's called post-marketing real world studies as well, right? So that's what we do in a nutshell, but happy to delve more into that if it's helpful.
Yeah, we'll definitely probably go into more of it as we talk more about the technical side of things and like AI and healthcare and how all those intersect. But one trend that we do notice at Health Engine is a lot of the problems that founders are tackling with their companies, they come across these problems due to some sort of personal experience or some interesting anecdote or insight that led them to solving this problem. How did you come across this problem with clinical trials, and what led you to building in this space?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The um, what really kind of got me uh, motivated in this direction was that a close family member had been suffering for many years, for many decades, actually, with rheumatoid arthritis, and you know, she had tried many experimental therapies, as in clinical trials, engaged and enrolled in them, and tried them out with bad results, actually, in the sense that not it didn't really produce the uh, results or outcomes she was expecting, and in addition, had a lot of side effects, which were unfortunate and not expected. So yeah, it got me to you know thinking that how difficult it is, and how hard it is for these pharma companies and drug developers to actually identify drugs, the right drugs for the right patients that will produce the intended effects and not produce other kinds of effects, right? I mean, that's remains a big challenge uh, until today. So that, got me going, thinking down this path, right? And then um, as I got in, through my career working at ZS and then seeing some of this in real life, right? That made the decision to sort of ultimately go down the entrepreneurial journey, having seen the corporate world and done quite well in that realm. But I had the itch to innovate and disrupt, to find a solution to this issue that I'd experienced firsthand in my life, with respect to my close relative. So, um, so yeah, that's so decided to go the entrepreneurial path to carve something out in terms of a disruptive solution. And of course, initially, we were building an AI to uh, in the space of hematopathology, to sort of automate the work of reading a peripheral blood smear and diagnosing diseases. But then the core challenge of getting these clinical studies right and pointing them in the right direction, right, finding the best suited patients for a therapy is really where I ultimately settled on, right? And that's what we're engaged in with Collate AI, right? And that's the reason we got into it.
Yeah, so I think one thing there that I wanted to talk more about is kind of the transition from, obviously working within industry, working within healthcare, or life sciences consulting, and then moving to entrepreneurship. Do you think, like, beyond, what do you think drove you to have this urge to innovate, to disrupt, really? Because I feel like that's a story that a lot of founders, it's a kind of big decision, right? You're walking away from, a long career, walking away from, from a lot of opportunities too. It's a big risk that you're taking on. What do you think was the biggest driving factor there that led you to, take this risk?
Yeah, you pointed that out correctly. So it's uh, as you said, it is risky, and it is sort of it can be it can be frustrating and full of failure, right? To go down the entrepreneurial path. So uh, and over the years, I've had a pretty good run um, in the corporate world, if you will, right? And being in positions of leadership, having sort of ascended that ladder, proverbial corporate ladder, so to speak, right? And that was had its own fulfillment and share of fun. It was certainly, it certainly pays the bills and then some, right? And But you also deal with, I mean, you have to sort of operate within the confines of the company that you're working with, and sort of uh, not that that's a bad thing in and of itself, but it can get, I mean, over the years, it can get constraining and frustrating depending on what you're doing. So so I felt the urge to innovate, really, right? And do something disruptive in a space where I felt a calling, right? Like the issue that I mentioned with respect to um, clinical studies and the lack of visibility to what's happening, and finding the right patients at the end of the day, right? For a therapy, which is what the root of these studies is about. So that uh, ability to uh, innovate and disrupt and work in the area you really want to work, and take the risks you need to take. Um, that's not necessarily available in the corporate path, right? So that's what led me down the path of being an entrepreneur. Um, of course, you're giving up some things. You're giving up, the safety and the security, let's say, of a job, to the extent that those things are safe and secure, but it is, it definitely, I would say, relative to an entrepreneurial path, that's a safer path, right? Um, but it's really the urge to innovate and disrupt, and do something that can potentially be first of its kind, and first to market, right? Really, uh, it's unlikely you can ever get to do that in a corporate setting, right? It has to perfectly align with the mission and direction of the company, and of course, you're still operating within the confines of the strategy and the path that the company decides to go down, right? So, yeah, that's what led me down this path, and it's been a fulfilling path. It can be risky, as you say. There's no guarantee of success. Uh, there is also not necessarily like it takes some time to go from zero to one as an entrepreneur. That's the hardest part of it, right? So getting those initial breaks, you know, to get your first customer, you need to build a product. To build a product, you need money. But to get money, you need your customer. So it's like this cycle that it's each one is dependent on each other, and which one comes first is the question, right? So yeah, so getting that's the risk of being in the entrepreneur, but it's but the ability to do the what you want to do and create that disruption is what led me down the path. And it's been a fulfilling path, right? Really enjoyed it, and I would not give it up. This having experienced it, I wouldn't give it up for anything else. Um, and I do feel, by the way, I mean, sorry, I wanted to, on the question you asked, there's the experiences that I've had have sort of prepared me for being what I am today, right? So it has been fulfilling that way as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think one thing we do, like, I think a common trait among the most successful founders is that passion to just innovate and build something in a space that they're really passionate about. And you did mention that, life sciences is a space that you were passionate about in this healthcare, partially because of, your personal experience. But I think you did mention before that you were already working in life sciences consulting before moving to being an entrepreneur in the space. And even before that, you're working in operations management and real estate. So, what inspired the initial switch towards healthcare away from the previous industries that you were working in?
Yeah, it was really I mean, a big driver was the personal experience that I had with respect to my family member, and then the incredible opportunity, and the problem that existed in that space. I mean, problems exist in every space, but uh, got my toes dipped into it to a large extent with my life sciences consulting, strategy consulting work. And the problems there were quite evident. And so being in this space, and doing what we're doing now, we have a strong sense of purpose, right? So if we succeed in our endeavor, uh, we can really make a difference to people's lives. And 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 with the advent of AI and then Gen AI, I mean the potential is almost unlimited in terms of what we can do and how we can really make a difference to people's life. I think it's far more purposeful, I would say, right? This particular space and field. Um, Not to say that other fields are not that way, but I've seen a few things over my life, and but at the end of the day, the common theme behind it is uh, leveraging my strategic thinking ability and leveraging my ability to sort of build build and create a business from potentially a very small base or multiply and grow a business from a smaller base into a much larger thing. That's sort of been the underlying theme of what I've done well on, and uh, if I could bring that to life sciences in particular, where we have the purpose can be very strong, and there's lots of areas and disease areas where the unmet need and the burden of these diseases is huge, right? So those things are powerful about this space. So those are some of the things that motivated me to get into it.
Yeah, it's definitely an area with, a lot of change that can come about, and building in the space is definitely intimidating, but I think it can have a lot of impact. One thing I did notice is that whenever you refer to collate or whatever you're doing right, whatever it is that you're working on right now, you say we. And one thing we do like to ask about is how the founding team of a company came about. How did you put together the people behind collate at the start, and how did those relationships and that team come about?
That's yeah, that's it's an important marriage, and it's like all marriages, it needs diligent work, and it can also things can certainly go sideways, right? If you don't have the right people together. So uh, I was I met my co-founder, through another acquaintance, and uh, we were working together um, on some projects with respect to our alma maters in India that got us to sort of know each other well. And I appreciated um, his tremendous heart and his work ethic, and he's also a successful entrepreneur that has worked in the life sciences space, based in the Bay Area. So possesses the right background and wherewithal and skill set to do this together. And ultimately, you need to you need that personal chemistry as well, right? So that's very important. It's not always obvious from like a interview or a short conversation whether that will be there. But having had the experience of doing some work together to support our alma maters, and then having many mutual acquaintances that really endorsed him, and I'm sure he probably got that endorsement that he wanted about me. I think that's what got us eventually together, right? And so it's a marriage that the earlier you get into it with a startup, the better. So that you sort of are fighting the battles together and have a very shared sense of how you gave birth to it, and how the approaches you take. Uh, but yeah, I think we're glad it's been pretty strong so far, and our relationship endures as co-founders, and we continue to make something happen together for Collate AI in the future.
I think that's something that's also been echoed to me recently is that as someone interested in the startup space and while I'm in college meeting all these cool people doing working on difficult problems, working on building their skills, it's important to build the relationships now so that maybe in the future if I have an idea, I have these people around me that I'm acquainted with to build with, who I have a personal connection with, and they're obviously very talented people as well. So I think that this idea of having someone that you have good chemistry with that's also incredibly capable in the space to build with definitely makes it a lot easier. I do wonder though, Collate is obviously a very technical product. It is a very difficult solution to build to make all these predictions. How did you put together the technical skills necessary for the the initial team?
Yeah, that's it's you're correct. And it part of it is I can be very hands-on um, in terms of the data science and the science behind it, right? So I've been deeply interested in the space, always have had sort of a mathematical and analytical bent of mind from my, I mean, I did my undergrad like in one of the IITs in India, which has that reputation, um, and data science is an area that I got involved in quite heavily particularly over the last 10 to 15 years, right? So being hands-on in that, and then we identified a couple of an initial uh, leader for our product and data science team who actually came through a referral as well. But we were, yeah, uh, brought him in first, and he brought in another co-leader. So we have two co-leaders of our data science and product teams, who are both tremendous contributors, and then we augmented the expertise with clinical advisors and R&D advisors in the life sciences space, right? So they are quite heavily involved in terms of setting the uh, direction for the product and how we approach the problems and the models that we create to ultimately predict all these clinical outcomes. Um, I mean, we had one or two um, small missteps, but because we created a core uh, group of leaders that are quite strong and experts in the space with a strong advisory and clinical advisory network, business advisory and clinical advisory network. That all of that put together, I think, has uh, gotten us moving in the right direction, right? And at the end of the day, as the founders, both me and Chandra are pretty hands-on, and we you have to be. I mean, as a deeply experienced founder, you could make the mistake of not being hands-on, right? Because in my prior roles, I've had big teams working on stuff under me already that then delegate. So you can delegate to the team, and that team delegates to the next team, and so on. But you can't do that in a startup, right? So in a way, that's one of the hurdles you have to overcome as an experienced founder, right? That you have to be unhesitant about getting your hands dirty and being hands-on, and which I think both me and Chandra are. I think that's another part of the success that we've had so far.
I think being a hands-on founder also gives you a lot of the insight to kind of anticipate future problems, anticipate future trends that are going to arise, and kind of redirect the company, see what needs to be done. And I think that's definitely a great quality. Alongside, being very hands-on and having obviously a very strong technical team, you also mentioned on the Colate website that the time also aligned very well with recent advancements in ML and data are why right now is the perfect time to leverage Colate in the life sciences field. So I wonder also, what's your vision for the future of the integration of artificial intelligence within the clinical trials process or the pharmaceutical industry as a whole?
Yeah. The elements, there's four major factors that we believe have sort of come together to make this the right time to drive what we're doing in Kuwait, right? So number one, this R&D problem keeps getting worse, where the low-hanging fruit are gone, and it keeps getting more and more expensive, right? To bring out a drug, it's probably gone from $1 billion to like almost $2 billion at this point. The second, number two, we've got like a pipeline driving from the penetration of AI into the preclinical space that's created a sort of bottleneck pipeline stuck at the clinical stage with not enough coming out of that. There was only 55 drugs that I think got approved by the FDA in 2023, when literally almost 26 to 30,000 diseases are all being researched for different kinds of cures, right? So the actual throughput at the end of this is very small. Uh, but as you also touched on, there's opportunity which drives a couple more factors, right? One is the technology maturing in the machine learning, deep learning, Gen AI space, as well as the more ubiquitous availability of electronic health data, right? And and then lastly, things like adaptive trials that are have been there for some time, but are getting more adopted over time, right? Both by the drug developers as well as the regulatory bodies that are ultimately responsible for the approvals, right? So between these four factors, we believe this is the time is very correct to have a precision medicine tool that can actually predict clinical outcomes at the patient level that can be used for targeting purposes to transform these clinical studies. Um, and then, I think going forward, we see continued expansion of what we're doing across uh, multiple different therapeutic areas. I mean, we've started in certain ones like uh, some core oncology areas like hemonc, the hematology oncology intersection, colorectal cancer, lung cancer, and breast cancer. But we're also now involved in the metabolic syndrome and obesity space, and more recently in the immunology space and psoriasis. But there's also continual expansion of the product itself that we're in terms of features and so we have uh, a prediction component, prediction tool that actually does the patient level clinical outcome prediction. So you can literally put in individual patients that it can predict. We have a comparison component which compares in an apples to apples fashion across multiple alternative therapies. And then we have a co-pilot or a real-time study management tool, which provides different kinds of interactive dashboards, if you will, right, for all kinds of study management purposes in terms of insight into all the predictions, actuals, and the study documentation. And then I think you asked about the application of AI in clinical trials as well, right? Well, I think that's a big space, right? And um, I think AI, I mean, in the broader life sciences space, if you can sort of potentially break it out into three major buckets, right? Um, there's the commercial space, which is the whole sales and marketing side of things. There's the R&D, which is a side which is responsible for researching and developing and creating these therapies that can be life-saving. And then lastly, there's the production and supply chain bucket. So these are sort of the broad buckets. Um, the R&D component, actually the intersection between R&D and commercial is really where we are, but it's late stage R&D, which is clinical development and post-marketing real world studies, right? That space is a I mean is a big and powerful one, in terms of where AI can really make a difference and actually um, be that switch that really can change. It can be life saving or life changing, right? So in that, if I just focused in on that, there's been a lot of tools, a lot of AI tools that get into workflow automation and improvement and operational improvement, and process improvements and things like that. There's significant opportunity there, right? That continues to be a big area. I mean, you need to enroll, you need to keep patients engaged in the trial. You shouldn't lose them. You need to be able to monitor and track how things are going in an effective way. You need to have people collaborating across all these different stakeholders that are involved. You need to be able to create your summary and your regulatory submission in a sort of streamlined, smooth way. There's also the protocol creation, which is a very onerous exercise, case report form design. So there's so many different areas where AI is coming in and making a difference. Um, and of course, the targeted subspace that we're in is precision medicine in clinical development and in real world studies, right? So that's an area which we think, having this patient level clinical outcome prediction approach is sort of a novel and unique one that we have focused in on and hope to be first to market. But I'm sure that, given the bottlenecks that we're seeing in clinical development, there's other developments and players that'll come in here as well, right? But that sort of gives you a sort of a broader purview of everything that's going on here.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's obviously a really large and broad field, and just to see, how many different places that this new technology is being applied to and in what ways, I think is a very valuable perspective. One other question I do have is that, especially in late stage clinical trials, it's a pretty high risk field, I would say. And there are obviously worries and concerns to have about implementing new technologies like AI into these workflows, into the process that goes behind this is something that hasn't changed a lot in decades. So, how would you see yourself, or what are some issues you see potentially coming up in the next years to decades? And how do you see yourself or Collate navigating any of these potential issues?
Yeah, well, I think the we need to be. We're positioned as a decision support platform at this stage, right? So um, we're not. Um, we still need a human. The clinical researcher and the medical people behind these clinical studies are the ones that leverage our product and ultimately, um, you know, if there's decisions to be made in terms of a trial, but also, in terms of positioning their um, drug in a certain way with respect to other drugs. I mean, so ultimately they make the calls. So I think you know, so we're at a place where we're positioning as a decision support tool. Um, if um, if in terms of hurdles and risks that you asked about, broadly speaking, to what with respect to what we do, I mean, it's really getting people to leverage a platform like this and adopt it, and be accepting of the change that would bring in. So those are some of the typical things that you run into, right? So um, they work today with they go into these studies with just bringing in uh, broadly enrolling and recruiting patients without necessarily um, being targeted in a particular way, right? So there is some pluses and minuses to being very targeted. I mean, but overall, it is a plus, right? The minus is you may potentially you're obviously bringing a smaller pool of people, right? That are uh, uh, into the study, but that is the right pool of people, right? You you don't want to bring in folks for whom uh, the drug is definitely not going to work because if it's not going to be good for those people. It's also not going to be good for your results in the clinical study. Um, so, um, so it's that, but getting people to sort of um think about it that way, right? That yes, you are uh, on the face of it, apparently narrowing the number of people that your therapy is eligible for, but 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 those are the therapies that actually succeed. Because today, the problem that much of pharma suffers from, particularly these more complex diseases like the cancers and oncology, is many of these drugs are not uh, don't have super high efficacies and also produce a lot of all kinds of side effects, right? And so you want to, the less targeted you get, the more all these problems exacerbate, right? So so you do want to be targeted if you can. And while on the face of it, it looks like a smaller market, it's actually the right market, and you're going to get paid more because your figures, your efficacies and uh, your success rates and your endpoints will look much stronger with this kind of approach, right? Um, so that's so I think you know, overcoming those mindsets and the typical hurdles to change are probably the main risks, right, going forward for us.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to think about. It's definitely, I think making sure you have the right market is the right approach. And I think it's, um, yeah, just getting over those barriers. But I think it's great what you guys have done so far, and very excited to see, the traction going forward. But obviously, you have all this on your mind. It's a lot to think about. Being a founder is obviously pretty stressful. There's always risk involved. There's always all these things to worry about. And other founders we've spoken to have mentioned how they unwind, in their free time by writing stories, playing music, swimming, traveling. How do you find balance in your life and manage the pressures that come with building a company?
Yeah, um, I'm a gym rat, so I like going to the gym a lot. It gets me, it certainly gets me to unwind, and also the side benefit is that you actually get fitter, right? So it's got both a physical and a mental benefit, and then family time, right? With our we've got a couple of teenage kids, and my wife and I. So the four of us like to get away for some vacations and trips when we can, and of course the kids are getting older, so that we won't, you know, we won't be able to have this, these days of togetherness, going on forever. Of course, they won't be too far away, but yeah, gotta enjoy that family time when you can, right? So I think those would be the main ways that I would that I de-stress and unwind outside of work, right?
Yeah, as a teenage child who just recently moved away from home, I think the family time is definitely very important. Yeah, but I think it's great, definitely being in the gym. I've also started exercising recently, and it's definitely helps, this just helping clear the mind, especially during a busy semester. I think as a last kind of couple questions, just to wrap things up. We did talk about this earlier briefly that Colate isn't your first company. And just to talk about what are some of the most memorable or important experiences you've had as a serial founder now? Any important lessons you've learned? And as an extension for this, kind of as the last question we asked to wrap up the interviews, do you have any advice for other founders, students, or people in general trying to break into the health tech and entrepreneurship space?
Yeah, definitely can engage on these areas, right? So, uh, on the first topic, which was what we've learned, what I've learned um, through the uh, through the founding experience and probably even broadly in my career, I think you know it's I mean, being a founder is not for the faint of heart necessarily, right? So it's a tough road. Um, the success rates in these in startups, tends to be less than 10% or probably closer to 5%. And it's and it never gets easier necessarily, right? So you have to and especially getting those initial breaks can be long and frustrating, and it's a circular dependency because everybody is pointing to everybody, like your investors want customers, your customers want the product wants the investor, right? So um, so you got to find a way out of that circular gridlock to get something moving first. Find early adopters. So I think, so number one, that toughness of mind and the perseverance is a super important skill set. It's not just a skill set. You also need to be in a position where you find a way to live life. Like you have some financial coverage because this can be there's risks behind this, right? So you have to be at that stage in life. You have to have the backing to get into it. Uh, then if you can put those factors behind you, then the next part of this is about, well, the idea is one part of it. You certainly need the idea, which is differentiated and that hasn't necessarily been heavily explored before or yeah, or executed before. Um, so that's another one. You know, I would always say get a, if you are able to, it's good to have a co-founder, right? You shouldn't have a co-founder for the sake of having a co-founder because it can go wrong quite easily because it's like another marriage, right? But if you are able to, it's beneficial to have somebody else to sort of worry about the same things that you are and all those existential worries that you have as a founder. It's good to have another shoulder to cry on and lean on, whenever you need. And and then remember that it's a long-term journey, right? It's not there's no quick, easy silver bullets, right? That you can just jump out of. And you should rarely go into this. I wouldn't suggest going into this with a short-term view, like thinking that you can get out of this in like 3 years or 4 years, with any level of success. Like you could do that if you went into a job, you can actually switch a job, right? Or stop working and still have something behind it. Here you may go through a few years and you may not have much, but if success can come suddenly but you should still have a long-term mindset. I mean, that's because then your behavior and your approaches towards working it will be the right ones. Um, yeah, so I think, keep those kinds of elements in mind. And then, the positives, of this experience are that, well, you certainly will experience less politics, if you will, like you might in a bigger company. You are not going to be fighting for territory because everything is your territory, right? And you're going to end up doing almost everything, many more things than you would do otherwise if you were in a job. Um, and then uh, and then the other, and then don't try to, if you're trying to build a product, I would always encourage people to do this full time, right? Many founders try to do something on the side. Uh, I mean, I understand why, because they have other things going on, and you don't want to give up something that's giving an income. But I've never seen a product company uh, succeed with that approach, right? So you do need to go full time. You have to take the risk, take the plunge, and if you want other people to believe in you, you have to believe in it first, right? So, and you're showing that by being full time, right? Um, so that's another lesson that I would give. What was the second part of your question? Maybe I covered some of it in what I said, but
I I think that was most of it. Just advice for not like beyond founders, just students or people in general trying to break into health tech or entrepreneurship.
yeah. So I think those would be the elements. I think if you're a student, I think the things you probably should worry about, well, certainly is, you probably would need to make sure you have some financial security, to cover yourself in some way. It doesn't have to be in a big way because your needs are probably smaller, right? But at least so that you don't have to worry about that element while you're building a company. And you truly, truly need to pick something that you're passionate about, and that you also have to have some edge in, right? I mean, you don't want to. I mean, you probably don't have, if it's an experienced founder, they can probably say that they're experts in some areas. As a student, you're going to have to really show why you are the guy to do this. And so, yeah, if you've done some, if there is some passion projects that you've undertaken and, you want to discover something, I mean, those are usually good ones to sort of eventually lead down the path of getting into a startup, right? Um, and and remember that it's not the stories you read in the press are again about, I mean, you read successful startup stories, but keep in mind that for every success, there's 1,000 failures, right? So it's not necessarily as glamorous as it appears from the outside. But it's very fulfilling. And so yeah, entrepreneurship should definitely be on the list of choices as a student, right? And but it has to be right for your situation.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's great advice for, as someone who has a lot of student founders around him, as someone who is, always thinking about the startup space, it's things to keep in mind. Um, just to know, things will be all right, but also I need, to follow these kind of rules to make sure I'm headed in the right direction. But I think that's about it. It's been a great conversation hearing about Colate, hearing about you and your experience, your story. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
No, I think that covers most of the elements, but I would encourage anybody um, that's interested in hearing more about what we're doing, please reach out. That includes both companies in the biotech and biopharma space uh, that are working through their clinical development or working through post-marketing studies to find your right patient targets and compare your therapy with other therapy alternatives. And then also to people that want to, uh, may consider investing in us, so potential investors. And then lastly, if you want to work with us in some way, right? Like, either as an intern or in other capacity, in all those situations, I would encourage you to uh, unhesitatingly reach out to me and or to any of us in the company, and let's go from there.
All right, wonderful. I think that's it. It's been a great conversation. Very nice to meet you. Very nice to hear about everything. And thank you so much.
Thank you.